I mentioned at the start of the show we have a guest joining us in studio. Some of you who have listened to my show for a long time will recognize his name, Wade Miller. He used to join me in the show when it was on Salem Radio as one of our roundtable, second hour roundtable folks. He is a extraordinarily accomplished man. He was in Texas at that time, working for Heritage Foundation, had just a great go-getter for Heritage Foundation and organizing activists here in Texas. He went on to work in Washington, D.C. I guess he first worked for the Ted Cruz campaign. We'll ask him in a second. Ted Cruz campaign, but then he went on to be chief of staff for Chip Roy, one of the very respected first term, and now he's second term, I guess, member of Congress in Texas, a rock solid conservative, was his chief of staff. And now he is, as you can see on the screen, executive director of Citizens for Renewing America, a new organization based in Washington, D.C., but he happened to be in Texas, and I'm thrilled he could be. He's right here with us, so please help me welcome Wade Miller. Hi.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been a while, and it's good to be back.
Good to see you, sir. Okay, so the reason I wanted to have you on, as you know, so his organization put together, I was talking to you about critical race theory kind of on and off. I've had guests on the show talking about it. I'm doing my my seminar tomorrow, Thursday, 2 days away, that summit here in Dallas. But you put together something, and I want to have you first, you can talk about Citizens for Renewing America, but I really want to hit on what you wrote. I'm going to hold up for our listeners to see. This is what Wade wrote, his organization wrote and put out. The URL in order to access this is available on our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage under shows, drop down list of links. You can see this here. It is entitled Combating Critical Race Theory in Your Community, an A to Z guide on how to stop critical race theory and reclaim your local school board, a mission we should all share. So that was you that pretty much put this together?
Yes, so, well, I worked with a lot of experts, a lot of theorists, a lot of academics, a lot of school board members, a lot of activists, a lot of parents, a lot of lawyers, because this is a comprehensive guide. So we have model legislation in there, that went through the layers we worked with some Trump administration officials who actually put in place the executive order that banned critical race theory in the federal government, which of course President Biden rescinded. But we worked with them to make sure that we got the language right so that when we put this in the hands of school board members, they could move forward knowing that this is pretty solid language to rely on. And so I basically separated it into three different groups. Section 1 is what is it? What is critical race theory? What is it not? Where does it come from? Section 2 is how do we grow a network around these ideas? And then Section 3 is kind of more overtly political, which is how do we find and recruit candidates to take over our school boards, reclaim them, and then from the bottom up start moving forward, and then moving on from school boards to colleges to government to the military to corporate HR departments, because this is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere, and I think it's only really in the last 2 years that people really started piecing this all together. And of course, I do a lot of claim and responses in the guide. For instance, one of them is, unless you're in law school, you're not learning critical race theory, because the argument is that critical race theory is a legal study. That's where it kind of came out of in academia. They developed it as a kind of a counter vision of what should have happened instead of the route that we took through the civil rights era, which was kind of more of a colorblind equality under the law. They actually posit that we should not have that. We should actually affirmatively discriminate based on race in order to achieve equity, and so on and so forth. And so I really try to tackle a lot of the claims and responses that you're going to run into. For instance, to that one, the response is, well, critical race theory proper, the legal structure, out of that came a framework of world vision by which they now infuse and teach other concepts in other curriculum, other classes. It could be math, it could be, et cetera, et cetera. And then really help people spot what it is and isn't, because in Fort Worth we got lucky. They actually do have the word critical race theory in the document, so it's easy to find. But there's like 80 other terms that they can use, and you'll have to use Freedom of Information Act requests to be able to actually figure out where is it and how to identify it, because until you can actually look at it and point to it in curriculum or in emails or in teacher documents or guidance or trainings, then you're kind of going in unarmed and unprepared. And so we talk through all of that, like how do you do a Freedom of Information Request Act? So I've got like 60 to 70 linked resources within the document. You can certainly print it out, but if you go online to americarenewing.com or citizensforrenewingamerica.com, you can look at the PDF online version, and it's got a whole bunch of hyperlinks to a whole bunch of really good materials. I think just yesterday, Chris Rufo, who we've worked with in the past on this, and my boss, Russ Vogt, has worked with extensively when they were when he was in the administration. He worked with Chris Rufo on getting the executive order to ban it done. But he just put out a video yesterday. It's about
Chris Rufo did?
Yes.
Okay.
And it is fantastic. For me, this is about defeating the obstacle, and the obstacle is critical race theory. So I've got no problems promoting other people's materials. Chris put out an absolutely phenomenal video. It's 17 minutes of walking you through what it is and isn't in plain terms and plain language, so that if you've dropped out of high school, you should be able to understand what critical race theory is. It's not. It's highly accessible. It's meant for everyone, because all parents need to be concerned about it. Whether you got a PhD or you're a high school graduate, your kids are being indoctrinated and their futures are being stolen from them. At this point, it's highly likely that it's in your schools, but you got to go find it and demonstrate it. And then also know what is and isn't. For instance, just because your kids are learning about slavery and white supremacy and the Trail of Tears, that doesn't mean critical race theory is present. But there's a good chance at this point, if it's in Fort Worth, which has a Republican mayor, and it's the largest Republican city in the country, you know, on paper,
yes,
Republican.
Yes.
I can guarantee you it's in most major school districts in America at this point,
right.
in various forms.
Quickly mention on Chris Rufo, and I don't know if you saw this, Wade, but for our listeners, I had a segment, I don't know when it was, recently, but there was a little clip. Christopher Rufo was being interviewed by Mark Lamont Hill, who is a black host, and I think his thing is called it's not Black Entertainment, Black News Today or something like that. And Mark Lamont Hill actually asked him, I mean, they were talking about critical race theory, was the topic of the interview, and Mark Lamont Hill asked Chris Rufo, okay, you know, what's so great about being white? Name one good thing about being white. And Christopher Rufo, I mean, he was so classy and he just said, well, I don't want to see the world in that construct. I believe in the individual and I have individual identity. And Mark Lamont Hill, did you see this interview?
No.
Mind blowing. Mark Lamont Hill goes, well, I can tell you what's so great about being black. And he runs through, family, culture, whatever he said. And Christopher Rufo, he was so good, he would not take the bait. He said, we're here to talk about how we don't want to talk and reason based on race.
And the important point there that's being made is that critical race theory as a construct and a framework, and even as a legal theory, is a fundamental rejection of the civil rights era and the principles of colorblindness and content of character mattering as opposed to the color of one's skin. It's 100% repudiation. In fact, Derek Bell, he's a CRT theorist, he specifically says that minorities in America cannot succeed, which is a dim worldview. Now, if you want to unpack that and look at some of the difficulties, lingering historical issues that certain communities face, economic, socioeconomic, some of the policies in the 50s, 60s that encourage fatherlessness in the home, those are all important things to consider, and you can consider them without doing so through a critical race theory perspective. But when you package that comment with Ibram Kendi, who wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, he overtly says, Kendi says affirmatively that we have to discriminate based on race if it's achieving equity. So he is embracing neo-racism, dividing us by our skin color, our sex, whatever it takes to create equity in the communities that he wants to create equity in.
Okay, there's another thing I was going to mention, and I don't have the paper in front of me, but I mentioned it in the show last week. There was a very lengthy research paper written by a graduate student, young man in I think it was Wisconsin, and he said, people keep asking what critical race theory is, so I'll tell you what it is. He runs through. One of the points he's making is, if you're white, it doesn't matter if you have supported civil rights, if you fight discrimination, if you actively do things to help lift up the black community, you can never escape, you are still a racist.
Oh yeah, and we've seen this in some of the more extreme materials where they will positively say in writing that if you are white, you are irredeemably racist, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of your personal values and beliefs, regardless of your commitment to a colorblind society, regardless of your commitment to opposing racism in our society. They will say that you are irredeemably racist and that you, as a function of your culture and you as a person, are responsible for systemic racism. And some of the trainings go so far as to assert that you should apologize to your coworkers And they'll divide people up. They're forcing people in HR departments throughout America to go through these trainings where they're basically told that they're the horrible people just because of the immutable traits that they happen to be born on. Not because of any specific statement, simply because of the skin color or sex that they're born, which is an anathema to what I think is important about the advances we've made in our country, which is that everyone deserves equality under the law, regardless of these immutable traits, and that everyone should be seen as equal culturally. We should see one another as brother and sisters, as family, as part of a nation together, unified, and that it is in all of our best interests to make sure that everyone has the best opportunity to succeed, regardless of all of these immutable traits or whatever groups that the CRT theorists want to divide us up and force us to combat one another with. And that's really disheartening. I actually think that that is why so many parents are finally waking up, because identity politics, wokeism, whatever it's been kind of disguised as, people are starting to see news stories and saying, well, this isn't just isolated incidents. And they're starting to go look, and they're finding it in their textbooks. They're finding omissions of some of the fundamental principles that should be taught, and they're being inserted with all of these divisive, hateful, and frankly racist and sexist materials. And it's people are fed up, and I think it's inspiring to see so many moms and dads standing up and saying enough.
Oh, it is. Some of the best videos online are actually, there's a black mom.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was, I think she was South Korean, but she's American now, mom, at a public school, trying to speak to the school board and denouncing this. She's saying, you're teaching our kids to hate each other.
Right.
Please stop doing this. You know, one of the I do want to get into more what you guys wrote and to what your organization is doing, but you know, one of the things that bothers me so much about this, there's always been a sense about America. You know, no one's claiming America's perfect. And no one's claiming our history is perfect, and no one's denying that racism exists. But America, and every skin color, race, ethnicity, national origin, it's a thing in human. But we have always, as a nation, tried to rise above it, tried to denounce it. America's been on a beautiful path, always moving forward, trying to achieve not equity, as in everybody has exactly the same thing, but equality under the law. And so there's a goodness about America that is just smothered by this theory, just ignoring that theory. And you know, the other thought about this bothers me so much is there's no outcome possible. It's not like you say, well, once we achieve, you know, we want to have some goal that's measurable and tangible. It's permanent separation. There's no goal. They're saying once we achieve this, we can all come together again.
Right, and so the other problem that I see that they're doing is by suggesting that we live in a systemically racist country, they're finding it under every rock, no matter what it is. It's their first idea is that this is systemic racism. And let me give you an example. I mean, I can play this game too. If the left wants to increase corporate taxation, what will that do on consumer goods? It will increase them. So isn't that you're increasing the cost of goods and services on low-income families? Statistically speaking, minority families are disproportionately impacted by such a thing. Is that not systemic racism if you're a Democrat supporting increasing corporate taxes? It's not, is the problem. We can have a robust debate on what corporate taxation should be and should not be. But just because one side wants to do it and one side doesn't mean that is necessarily systemic racism. And so this is what we see with the left is they'll claim everything is systemic racism. And so the challenge that I have is show me the law. Show me the law in writing that is systemically racist, which isn't to suggest that there's laws out there that disproportionately impact different communities. But if that's the case, let's have a conversation about it. Let's go talk about what we can do to make sure that the equality under the law is truly being achieved. But there's just no cabal out there at a national level that is trying to twist everything to benefit white people. And yet that is what the CRT theorists would have everyone believe.
That's the implication of the term systemic racism, institutional racism.
Right.
The implication is an unseen evil force is doing all of this. And there have been people I've spoken to who, you know, are relatively speaking conservative, who say, well, we've got to fight systemic racism. But when you push and ask, what does that mean? What exactly? There's not really an answer to it. It is, and I think those terms were chosen by people who want to push these theories because they sound intellectual. They sound like they must be a thing because it has a name now. It's systemic racism, institutional racism. When you push and say, what is that? If there's a specific problem, as you say, let's talk about it. If it's a policy regarding employment or applications to jobs or education, what is the issue? And let's resolve the issue. But I think the those pushing it don't want to discuss specifics. They want to just throw those terms out there, and it silences people.
And this is a very important point you just made, and so I'll unpack it a little bit more, which is that at the end of the day, this is cultural Marxism, overt cultural Marxism at play. Now, if I had said that 5 years ago, some people would have been like, that's a little conspiracy theorist, you're going a little too far, maybe they just like it, but it's not really cultural, it's not like Marxists, it's like a boogeyman. The problem with that viewpoint, and I think why so many people are seeing through that now and actually agreeing with us that this is overtly cultural Marxism, is Kimberly Crenshaw, who is one of the principal CRT theorists. She admits in her own book that the academic community that helped her develop this legalistic theory were overt Marxists, that these were Marxist professors that came up with this. And so they know that if they had gone in full frontal right into this with exactly what they wanted to do, talking early on about how we should be discriminating based on race and sex, it would never have been palatable because of our history and and kind of celebration of a lot of what occurred during the civil rights era. And so they didn't do that. So what they did is they unpacked it in 80 or so different terms. Some of them were good sound, like anti-racism. Who wouldn't be against? Who would not be for that? I'm an anti-racist. But anti-racism, as they mean it, is a completely different thing. It means so many diversity, equity, inclusion, social emotional learning. I've got a list of like 80 or so terms of these on our website, and it's linked in the document too. But we have a standalone blog post for just this, and it's actually in the model legislation too, so that that they can't get around that. But they've unpacked it in all these nice sounding. And so if you're a teacher, and through no fault of your own, because you haven't read, and by the way, we've got a reading list of all the CRT theorists, so if you really want to unpack it, but go read them. But if you're a teacher who's got your day full of third graders, you don't have time to go read 12, 15 different novels written by legal experts that are all very wonky. And so you're thinking, yeah, of course I want to teach my kids about how to be an anti-racist, and they slow walked it in, and now it's just prevalent and it's becoming more brazen. And it's the more brazen part that people are now starting to finally catch on, and that's why they're getting outraged. We're seeing teachers saying, I had no idea that I was teaching this until recently when it was explained, and now I see it. And now they feel, in fact, someone just recently wrote an article about positing and wondering, how much damage have I done to my students over the years now that I know what's going on here? And she's horrified by it. So.
Yeah, I love you went through all of that. And back to my termite analogy, the little nibbling away you didn't see happening, and the examples you gave are exactly right, and they sound such nice terms: diversity, inclusion. Well, who could be against inclusion? I don't know about exclusive. So he says, sure, I'm in favor of inclusion, and I'm in favor of diversity. And then they had celebrate, different ethnicities and races and national origins. Sure, I'm in favor of that. And all the while, you're being lured down the path of dividing America into silos based on skin color and race and ethnicity, and then you're ready, and then you're all set for them to pit them all against each other. I mean, it was I'm not saying one person came up with that, but that was a path this intellectual effort followed.
And once you have the masses on board, HR departments, corporate employees, members of the government, members of the military on board with accepting the fact that some of these are fundamental to just your job training and professional standards and learning about how to accept one another and recognize other people's faith in the workplace, and maybe they need to go pray 5 times a day and respect that. Then they infuse this, and so then if you oppose these trainings after this stuff is now infused into these terms and concepts that you've already accepted, then you're evil, you're a bigot. And that's the other thing we have to understand is, and I do think that the left is on the run. They actually trotted out Obama last week to come out and defend this.
I piled on that, yeah.
Right, but they're on the run, but if you try to combat this, and I think this is something that it's really important that everyone get comfortable with. You are going to be called a bigot. You're going to be called a racist. And I think that you just have to remember at the end of the day, the only way through this fight is straight through it. There's no going around it. There's no finding common ground because they don't want common ground. There's no logic or reason. The left is moving the football, shifting the arguments left and right. In fact, one of the principal arguments they say is, well, you just don't know what it is. Well, Kimberly Crenshaw says that it can't be defined because it's a dynamic theory, so it's always in flux. So the principal theorist will say that you can't define it, and then the left will say you can't define it, and as if like we're now supposed to solve Kimberly Crenshaw, who invented this, her conundrum. It's a double standard. They're creating intentionally impossible pathways forward for us. but the only way through is straight through it. And I think that people have to remember at the end of the day, it's worth it, because if we don't do it now, in 10 or 15 years, when it goes even further, when they're starting to outlaw certain things that we can even say and have punitive, it's going to be even harder. So the best time to fight this is right now. And yes, some people, like your job, if you speak up at a corporate, it's easy for me to do this because I'm paid to look into this and to oppose it. And I work with Russ Vogt, and he obviously brought me on board because I already believed that all this stuff was wrong. But I'm not going to lose my job if I oppose critical race theory. But a mom or a dad who speaks up at their corporate retreat, because they're training where the person's coming in and telling that everyone in the room is white devils, and that you're evil, and that you have no soul. This has happened. This has happened. That if you speak out against that somehow you're not an anti-racist, and therefore you're not good for our corporate culture. We have to accept that these are the risks, because our children's future is absolutely worth it. And you go through and you look at all of these elected members of all the at different levels on our side, who I think some of them are starting to wake up, but they have not fought this culture war for a long time. They've been silent, and they've been hesitant to do it because they have to worry about 2 or 3 percentage points shifts in their election. Look at that, and then look what our founder said at the end of the Declaration of Independence. Our fortune, our honor, our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. They put everything on the line for what they believed in, and we have elected officials now who are running from it or don't want to get involved because it could be a 1 or 2 percentage point deal, and they don't want to focus on social issues. If your elected official is not see that the culture war that we're now engaging in is the most important fight, because everything else is lagging in our economy. If your child is taught critical race theory and wokeism and all of this insane Marxist propaganda, they make it to college, they're further radicalized by Marxist professors, they make it into a corporate environment where their HR departments are reinforcing it, or into government where it's being reinforced through forced trainings, or even in the military where it's being enforced. Everything else in our society, politics, is lagging from that. We are not going to balance budgets. We are not going to lower regulations if we don't have a population that believes in the fundamental principle of America to begin with, and that it's a fundamentally good country, and it was founded on biblical values and a truth that we must adhere to. So, these are members who want to focus on tax cuts and spending. And look, those are important to me. But if we're not fighting on this, we're not going to survive as a republic. And so they have to engage. And I think parents and workers need to start shaming our elected officials by taking the lead, going out, putting themselves on the line, calling this what it is, which is neo-racism or state-sanctioned racism, oppose it, and force the left to answer those questions. Force the left to say, why is it okay in our classroom to discriminate against a child because of their skin color or sex? In fact, in our model legislation, it doesn't ban critical race theory. It bans 8 concepts. And I recommend anyone that has access, go to americarenewing.com or citizensforrenewingamerica.com. Go look at our model legislation on that website. It's Section 2B in the model legislation. Check that out. Read through those 8 prohibited clauses. Force the left to answer why they would allow any of those things to happen. Okay? Because they're all very common sense. Very common sense.
I love that. You've obviously thought through so many things. I can't wait to I just printed this out today, so I've not had a chance to read it. But you made a point I wanted to address a little bit, and I have used the expression, it is a media mockery mob. Mm-hmm. You have to decide if in America, on many issues, but this is a huge one, you have to decide, does it matter enough? I'm going to speak up, and I may have someone, you're going to end up being called a racist. Mm-hmm. I mean, this conference I'm hosting a couple days from now, I'm sure people think, oh yeah, easy for her to say, that's why I did, in part, I sought out black speakers. Mm-hmm. There's one good point to make. You may make it in here, I don't know, but there are many black conservatives denouncing critical race theory. Right. Many black conservatives saying this is going backwards, it's regressive, it's dividing us, it is wrong, it's immoral. I mean, from Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, two of our speakers at our conference are black conservative activists. So it is not a black versus white issue. It's what's true about America and what's not true about America. What's moral and what's not moral. There's a need to, but there's a huge need to be brave, because the media mockery mob cannot wait to shut you down if you challenge any of it. And you mentioned also, I could not agree with you more, Wade. This issue is easy for politicians to say, I'd like to stand up. I stand for low taxes and a strong military, limited government, all these kind of mantras. And everyone goes, yeah, I'm for that. But if they can't talk about this, which is going to destroy our culture and our military and our education, there won't be an economy to be talking about.
Right, and we actually tackle both of those issues in this guide. So on the first one, we make the point that whether you're Democrat or Republican, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, it's important that this nation be taught as a nation that has equality under the law and supports opportunity for all, and that if you work hard enough, you will succeed. And that's one of the problems with critical race theory, and why you see so many minority parents stepping forward to say that this is not right, is because what it's teaching their children is that no matter how hard they work, they cannot succeed. And what kind of an example are we teaching to young African American children to say that don't even worry about working hard because you cannot succeed because this is a systemically racist country? It's the exact opposite. Can we improve? Absolutely. But we should do it through a positivist vision, a positive movement where we continue to embrace a colorblind society. And so you're 100% right. And that's why I tried to get at all of that in this document to make sure that as much of the aspect, and we're probably going to come out with a version 2 later this summer. So I wanted to get it out there. I'm open to feedback. What's missing? What concepts? What's ideas? What arguments are you hearing out there in America about why you can't be opposed to critical race theory that aren't addressed in here? I'll go get the answer. I'll talk to some really smart people. We'll add that as a section in here. But I just think it's really important for people to be able to unpack all of this. And look, your average mom and dad doesn't have the time to go read those 10 or 15 critical race theory books. So right. Russ and I have been going through it. I'm currently reading a book about critical race theory in the military, written by a lieutenant colonel, active duty, by the way. Good for him. He's active duty and he's writing a book about it. He's putting his career on the line because he believes in America and he opposes Marxism.
Do you know this person?
I don't know him.
Okay.
I saw him on the news. I bought his book off Amazon. I'm starting to go through it.
Okay, you obviously saw the story of the Space Force commander, Lieutenant Colonel
Matt.
That's Lohmeyer?
Yes.
Okay, I am trying to track him down. I mean, I saw his interview on Gruber, and I know he wrote that book, and then he got relieved of his command because of that book. I would love to get a hold of him because, I would love to feature him at our fall conference. I think he's been so brave. And
as you know, I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I've got a lot of friends who are still in, and they don't want to put their name on this because they're worried about their careers, but they're telling me about all these trainings that are going. They're sending me slides, and I'm seeing examples. Just recently we had I think it was an Army training, and it talked about extremism. And okay, fine. Sure, as a professional conversation, we should tell members of our military they should not be participating in extremist organizations. You should not be, a member of the KKK.
Except who gets to define that?
Well, that's the issue. But when they went through 5 of the examples, all 5 examples were either white supremacy, Nazis, or white supremacists and Nazis. Not a single mention about Antifa or Black Lives Matter or some of these other radical entities. And by the way, on the topic of Black Lives Matter, we're seeing a lot of parents who, by the way, have a Black Lives Matter sticker on their car because they believe in the sentence. Now, I actually believe in that sentence. I think the organization is rooted in Marxism, and in fact, they're overt about it. They don't even try to hide it, so I'm not a supporter of the organization. I'm a supporter of the concept, but we're seeing parents who are supportive of that. They have Black Lives Matter stickers. When they see what's going on here, they're speaking up because their white son is being told that he is irredeemably racist in the classroom, and that's a step too far for them, so they're waking up. So this is not a Republican, conservative, right-wing. This is a bipartisan movement of parents who are finally waking up and saying enough is enough. We can talk about what's wrong with this country, but we can do so in a positive way without discriminating against our own children and making them to feel terrible about themselves.
I was going to say, if you have seen these stories of little children, they have a sobbing child coming home from kindergarten or first grade, a white child sobbing, what's the matter? And they were told they were evil.
Right.
Because of, as I say, the package you came wrapped in, nobody in this whole planet ever chose their skin color. It just is what it is. And you're being told this, and your child, who's impressionable, a young child, and I mean, that's who you're being told you are.
Right.
And you are a permanently evil person, and someone else is permanently, you are a repressor, and they are your victim.
Right.
I mean, it couldn't be more evil. I was going to mention, there was a guy we had on my show, Aaron Wrights, who is a deputy attorney general in Texas. I don't know if you happen to know
him, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He
Smart
was
guy.
fabulous. And he talked about going to his, I don't know which military branch, but anyway, he talked about going to he's in the Guard, so he went for his once a month training. And usually you show up and you're going to practice, I don't know, shooting or conditioning or strategy. And they spent the weekend talking about, basically, critical race theory, social justice stuff, encouraging people to turn each other in.
Right.
To say, if you hear something, you say things doesn't sound quite right, turn them in. I mean, the whole thing is so antithetical to what America's supposed to be like.
Well, I actually left school after 9/11 to go enlist. I was in college to enlist in the Marine Corps. It's one of the proudest things I've ever done. I'm a huge fan of the military. I'm a huge fan of the Marine Corps. We have a long lineage of people in my family who served. I don't know if I would go in the military today because I love my country. And that's a scary thing for me to say, because I see what's coming down from DOD. I see what these command master sergeants are doing. I see what these commanding officers are doing, what they're putting out on their social media with blue check marks as a member of the military, not their own private free speech type of issue. These are blue check mark unit accounts. And they're putting out this crazy stuff, and the commercials. I mean, at the end of the day, so what they're trying to do is tap into the fundamental fairness and love that we try to embrace as a culture. The military's job is to kill our enemies, and we should be recruiting people with that mentality. That's why we have a long history of recruiting commercials that give you goosebumps, that make people want to go and fight evil. Instead, it's this weird hodgepodge of socially justice stuff. No one's going to go enlist at that point because they want to stop communist China from committing atrocities across the globe, or stop Russia from doing what they're doing, or stop radical Islam. And then when you contrast that against the ads that Russia and China are running, it's horrifying. But to wrap that all back into the point I made, I don't know if I would join today, and I'm really sad to say that, and I don't know if I would recommend my son, because I don't want him to be indoctrinated into Marxism. And that's a scary thing, knowing that people are taking an oath to the Constitution, and they're being trained in ways that subvert that oath. And they're being trained by commanding generals and senior enlisted people who, in my opinion, are abandoning that oath to do this.
Right.
And that's shameful. And we need to wake up in the Pentagon. We need to wake up. And here's the ultimate problem here, is that they know it's once you get past like lieutenant colonel, it's very political. At a certain point, you have to have congressional approval to move forward. So they're all playing the game. They want to check the box on the social justice-y stuff so they can get their next star or whatever. And while doing so, they're leaving the rank and file enlisted to the vultures, and they're allowing it to happen for their own personal benefit. And that's shameful. And I actually, don't quote me on this as a serious stuff, but I sometimes wonder if it wouldn't be in the next administration to just fire everyone over the rank of lieutenant colonel, and all branches start over from scratch.
Okay, and while they're at it, I would like them to clean out the upper levels of the Department of Justice, the State Department, the FBI, CIA. There's a whole bunch of that. Just not just the whole social justice thing, but the loss of the idea of America and the rightness and goodness of America. We have a leftist infiltration that is hard to determine. Okay, we could probably talk all day. I want to have you tell our listeners again how they find your document. First of all, we can talk briefly. Tell me about your Citizens for Renewing America, the director of that.
Sure, I am the director of Citizens for Renewing America, which is the action organization of Center for Renewing America, and Russ Vought is the president of both organizations. And he is the former director of Office of Management and Budget under President Trump. So in that position, he had a really big hand in kind of helping to shape and drive the America First agenda. And as things became clear in January that the election was going to go in a different direction, he decided to start this entity so that we could continue moving forward the existing America First agenda, and then also what they were envisioning for the next 4 years, start developing those policies. And perhaps if President Trump wins in 2024, or if another candidate who is friendly to the America First agenda wins, we could perhaps Roosevelt will go back in and help or they'll adopt a lot of what we're working on to go continue to advance that. So we kind of consider ourselves from a policy and activism standpoint, kind of the America First wing of the America First movement. And we're working with a lot of other organizations who are similarly aligned, like America First Legal, the American Accountability Project. There's a whole bunch of different entities that are all kind of value added. And of course, we're working a lot with Conservative Partnership Institute, which is a Jim DeMint entity. And that's, of course, where Cleta Mitchell, who's really great on election reform stuff and was a really good aid to President Trump in trying to fight some of the stuff going on in Georgia. Mark Meadows is now at CPI, Rachel Bovard, who's been fighting big tech for years. So we're finally getting a really good network of America First individuals who are gearing up for the future fight of the conservative America First movement in ways that I think have been neglected over the last couple decades.
I love hearing that. Actually, a lot of what you're doing are things if we could re-elect more people in the House and Senate that had this spirit, they could be spearheading some of this. But I love that you're there in Washington. Love that you're doing this. How do people, again, tell them the website, how they find this?
Sure. So you can find this at americarenewing.com. That's americarenewing.com, or Citizens for Renewing America. And it's a PDF. You can download it. You can send it to whoever you want. No pride of authorship here. We just want the information to get out there. And if you've got good ideas, send us those ideas. We'll consider them for our version 2.0 later this summer, the back to school special. So,
Wade Miller, I'm so glad you're in Dallas. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be back.
Great to have you.